Hello everyone, how are you all doing? Today I welcome you to the third season of What If Naruto Fell in Love with FEM ITACHI and Awakened the Wood Element? You can find the previous episodes on the channel. Now then, enjoy.
Chapter 10. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. There was a thoughtful frown on his ever-stoic face. The room was filled with silence, only disturbed by the rhythmic ticking of the clock hung on the wall behind him and the sound of a pencil tip rubbing against the paper surface. His pale eyes scanned the document with utmost seriousness. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. The times have been kind to his family. Ever since the growing tension between the Uchiha and the general populace, the Hyuga have seen an exponential increase in popularity and influence. Their reputation as one of the noble clans of Konohagakure has all but bolstered, now truly being the most respected family in the village. He didn't want to be in Fugaka's shoes right now, or any time, really. The Uchiha were detestable. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. He blinked, his pale white eyes showing the tiniest hints of confusion. Hinata, his daughter, and the heiress to their clan was being tutored by the clan elders, being groomed to be the next head of their noble clan. The girl had a knack for leadership, something that he could see in her eyes, all the while still maintaining the slight innocence that was not rare to see in a child of her age, even if the elders disliked it. Now, almost at the age of 5, Hinata was sufficiently familiar with the politics of their clan, on a beginner level, of course. She still had a lot to learn, but she was by no accounts a foolish girl. That is what made him truly confused as he read the document laid in front of him again and again. Petition to sponsor the Ichiraku ramen shop by Hyuga Hinata. His eyebrows furrowed slightly. What nonsense is this? A joke? Why would the Hyuga benefit from sponsoring a rundown noodle shop? He failed to comprehend it, running the gears of his mind. In the end, he could not understand the thought process behind the statement. He coughed, somehow managing to make it sound polite and authoritative at the same time. Came with being a Hyuga. At least that was what he was told by his parents when he was but a boy. The door to his room, an intricate design on its light blue frame that did not betray their status as a noble clan, slid open, a branch member sitting on his knees by the entrance. He did not speak. One does not speak to the clan head unless first spoken to, and stared at the ground in front of him. Hyuga Ito, his trusted assistant and advisor, an older man with an experienced, wrinkled face. He was wise and made excellent tea, something that Hayashi had been addicted to once upon a time. He was also very skilled in knitting sweaters, something that he silently found amusing since the old man's name quite literally meant yarn. Truly a model assistant. Bring my daughter. Ito never asked useless questions. He merely did whatever was asked of him and only ever giving his opinion if asked. He nodded but did not meet the clan head's eyes. Getting up gracefully, he went to complete his task. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Hayashi waited patiently, sitting in the Seiza position, knees fold and palms resting on thighs. His eyes were closed, a frown on his face. He didn't have to wait long before the door slid open yet again. His daughter stood at the entrance, her hands folded inside the sleeves of her lilac-colored kimono. Looking at Hinata like this, Hayashi was constantly reminded of the stark resemblance she shared with his late wife, her dark blue hair, especially. It always brought the slight piercing pain in his heart with it, and a reminder of the times long past but not forgotten. Hinata! The girl nodded in acknowledgement, walking towards the table in the middle of the room. She sat down on the opposite side, grace in her steps, in a posture similar to her father. Do you know the reason why I called you? Hinata met his eyes unflinchingly and nodded. I would like an explanation. His tone was not stern but full of curiosity. What did his daughter see in the barely standing noodle stall? He was much interested in the thought process behind this decision. Maybe he could teach Hinata a thing or two using this situation as an example. Hayashi faced his daughter, his face the epitome of a Hyuga mask, staring down at her with a challenging glint in his pale eyes. He was seeing a pattern here where he is coerced into doing stuff for her out of guilt, and he's none the wiser. It was distressing, unbecoming of a clan head. He would not fall into her trap this time. Good morning, Hayashi-sama. Hayashi nodded at the passers-by, his lips thinned in a neutral line as he walked sedately down the busy street. The citizens of Konoha gave him a short berth and customary bows, which he returned with brief nods of acknowledgement. It was not rare for the Hyuga clan head to simply take a stroll in the village, but he had a reason today. To be precise, the elders had summoned the clan heads from all the prominent clans. For what? He had limited guesses. This meeting would not be the first of its kind, nor the last, and the second reason, he gripped the paper in his grasp, tight enough to leave wrinkles, hid under his kimono sleeves as he folded his hands within them. He could not believe it. He had lost against the wishes of his daughter yet again. Where did it all go downhill? Since when did he become so weak? Yes, his late wife. He never could refuse Hinata's mother either. His wife Hitomi was a kind woman, almost to a fault. Hayashi's father had frowned at him, disappointed, not pleased with him for being smitten over a woman. But he didn't care, could not care. Hayashi was proud to admit that he hadn't budged under his father's not-so-subtle persuasions and finally married the woman he loved in a traditional Hyuga wedding. Their love had blossomed. 2 years into the marriage, and his wife gave birth to their daughter. Pale, small thing she was, delicate, feeling her little fingers wrap around his rough and calloused ones. It was a surreal experience. But things never last forever. Good or bad, all things must end someday. And every living being dies. It's one of the only absolute truths in the universe. Hitomi's time had come earlier than expected. Hayashi had remained by her bedside, held her hand. The same hand then he held on their wedding day, and stayed strong in front of their daughter, who was just an infant at the time. Only when he was in his room, at the end of the night and truly alone, did he allow himself to grieve. He has changed much since those times, hardened his will and his heart, became a true leader, but he still couldn't refuse his daughter's wishes. And the amusing thing was, even if his mind registered it as unbecoming for a man of his stature, his hardened heart still couldn't bring itself to care about it. Walking down the street with the morning sun right over his head, he didn't realize, lost in his thoughts as he was, when the smallest of smiles had formed on his face. Thunk, thunk, thunk. This was bad. If things were bad for his clan before, they were downright terrible right now. 3 more incidents. That too just in the last week. TCH. Fugaku's scowl deepened. Their clansmen from the Konoha police force had beat up some of the civilians. Some clowns who badmouthed the Uchiha clan. It was to be expected. They should know better than to antagonize the clan that could wipe them off with a simple breath. But the overall, twisted version of the news put them in a bad light, accusing them of abusing their authority. It wasn't anything new. Incidents like these have always occurred in the past. But the frequency has been steadily increasing in the past few years. Thunk, thunk, thunk. It annoyed the Uchiha patriarch to no end. He rubbed his eyes with the back of his hands, the dark bags prominent beneath them. When was the last time he had slept peacefully at night? Away from all the responsibilities. Away from the burdens, sandwiched between the village and clan. The only time he remembers being at peace was when Mikoto made his favorite sushi for dinner. The 4 of them had slept under the comforting cold light of the moon in their backyard that night. That was over a year ago. The Uchiha elders are conspiring, using their old and cunning minds into planning treachery. They thought they could get away with it without him knowing about it. Would keep him, their goddamned leader, in the dark as they schemed. Fugaku was not a foolish man. Neither was he unfamiliar with scheming, but he was a man who was at a loss. The path looked bleak. The Uchiha were in a dark place, rotten from the inside, oppressed from the outside. And at the apex of it all stood one man responsible for all of them, accountable for their contentment, prosperity, and well-being. Uchiha Fugaku was that man, but he was just one man. Thunk, thunk. Thursday. He pushed the table away harshly, throwing it away against the wall. The wooden construct was shattered to pieces as it impacted against the wall. The Uchiha clan head picked up one of the sharp wooden splinters between his fingers and stood up from his position, marching towards the gate that connected his study to their lawn. He slid it open roughly and flicked his hand, throwing the splinter as if it was a projectile. Swoosh! Widened black eyes greeted him on the other side. A young boy, not more than 5, stuck in a throwing pose with 3 metal shuriken between his fingers. The boy had spiky black hair and a face that resembled his own, although right now it resembled a ghost's. Father. His voice trembled, and his dark eyes were wide, darting left and right between his father's hands, scanning for the thing that had almost nicked his cheek. I've told you not to disturb me while I'm working. Many times now. His voice was deep, sending shivers down the young Uchiha's spine. Fugaku narrowed his eyes at his son, his hands crossed in front of his chest and a frown on his hardened face. The Uchiha patriarch might have felt a pang of guilt when the young boy flinched, but he pressed on. Have I not? Sasuke averted his eyes, looking at his feet and putting his tiny hands behind his back as he replied in a subdued voice, Yes, TCH. He swept his gaze across the clearing, noticing the ground littered with stray shuriken and kunai, a makeshift dartboard with weapons embedded on it. Some were towards the center of the board, while most of them were on the outside. Fugaku's face twisted in a nasty frown, one that filled his son with dread. He shook his head. Disappointing. You can't even throw them right. At your age, your elder sister could. He stopped as he felt a delicate hand on his shoulder, the touch not unfamiliar to him but still rare. He didn't turn around to look into his wife's eyes. He already knew what he would see within them, pity and disappointment. He had no place for either of them. Did not deserve or need anyone's pity. His jaw tensed as he rounded off, shrugging the comforting hand away with a scoff. The door slid back harshly behind Fugaku as he went back inside, leaving Makoto and Sasuke alone in the backyard. The duo was silent for a while. The young Uchiha had not looked up yet, but he noticed when his mother made her way towards him, kneeling down in front of him. The boy balled his shaking fists, shutting off his eyes when he felt his mother's fingers cupping his chin. Take what your father said with a grain of salt. He hasn't been well for some time. Her voice was gentle, so unlike his father's rough voice that dripped with irritation. Sasuke loved his mother, but he loved his father just as much, craved for his praise and acceptance. The duo of father and son had been getting closer for a while as Fugaku shifted his focus on his son. Since Izumi didn't quite require his supervision as often as she used to do when she was younger, Sasuke was the one getting his attention now. Makoto was happy to see the father and son bonding, but all that progress might have gone down the drain just now. She reached up to his eyes and wiped the tears that trickled down his cheeks with her thumbs. This broke the self-restraint of the young boy as he broke into sobs, throwing his tiny arms around his mother's neck and smashing his face on her shoulder. Makoto rubbed his back as the child shook in her arms and ignored the distinct wetness on her shoulder. I try so hard, mother. I really do. He shook his head against his mother's shoulder. I just want to be like her. The degree to which Sasuke looked up to his elder sister was sometimes terrifying to Makoto. She pushed him away gently, her arms on his shoulders, and gave the young boy a small grin. Say, Sasuke-kun, I have an even better idea. Sasuke tilted his head, his still moist eyes blinking questioningly. What could be a better idea than becoming like his sister? She clearly was the best. Everyone said so. She pointed her finger to his chest, her grin widening. You can be just like yourself. Makoto waited for a response, her eyes closed as she smiled at her son, only to blink in confusion when she opened them and found an unimpressed Sasuke looking at her. He shook his head quickly. That doesn't sound good at all. Of course it does. Makoto jabbed her finger at his chest, making him cover it with his arms. It tickled. Sasuke giggled, making his mother smile mischievously. Makoto slowly inched her hands towards his sides and scooped him up in her arms, ignoring his cries of protest. You're so cute, Sasuke-chan. Mom! Sasuke whined. Don't call me that. Despite his words, the smile on his face was blinding, only matched by the one on his mother's face. Their laughter filled the backyard as the dark-haired woman swung her child in her arms. All was well again, but it wasn't. The villagers gave him a wide berth as the Uchiha patriarch made his way to the council chambers. His hands were folded inside his green kimono, the Uchiha sign proudly displayed on its back, and his eyes narrow, only looking at the front. He didn't need to look. He could hear the whispers, feel their unfriendly and suspicious glares on his back. It didn't bother him. They weren't even a threat. There was once a time when the citizens of Kanahegakure looked at him with respect. The police force was seen as heroes, the ones who served justice to the deserved. People saluted him, saw him in admiration, instead of cursing him behind his back. The times have changed. He was afraid for the Uchiha, afraid of what might happen with his clan. He was also afraid of the Uchiha, afraid of what they might do in retaliation. Today's youth didn't require much to rebel, that he knew. Oi! You! He didn't bother to stop when he heard the shout. The voice was slurred, the man probably drunk. He had better things to do than wrestling with every drunk lying in his own piss in the alleys. Stop now, coward! Uchiha scum, the lot of ye and that demon child, he slurred out and scoffed. Grazing our village to the ground and still have the arrogance to walk round like ye own the place. The man was attracting attention to them, the crowd now gathering around them in circles. Fugaku halted in his stride, making the man stop his babblings for a bit in a brief moment of sobriety. He turned around and had a good look at the terribly dressed individual. His shirt had a significant-sized hole in it that gave the onlookers an unwanted look at his chest. The drunk had messy brown hair that covered most of his forehead and shadowed his eyes. He didn't seem particularly familiar with hygiene, what with the stench of alcohol blatantly violating the personal space of the Uchiha clan head. The man looked around, noticing the crowd that he had attracted with his stunt, which increased his confidence. He wasn't terribly familiar with the differences between a shinobi and a civilian. So what if they were called by different names, huh? They were still human beings, yeah? Human beings have limits, and surely, getting ganged up by 20 or so well-bodied youthful lads would be a one-sided matchup, shinobi or not. Not so tough now? Heh. Listen here, scum, he said and spat on the ground between him and the clan head. I'll give ye 3 days to leave the village. Fugaku didn't correct him when the man gestured 4 fingers on his hand. The drunk grinned. 3 days. And if ye don't, me and my friends will be knocking on your door. He giggled, stumbling on his feet as he failed to balance himself. The onlookers grew in numbers, watching the encounter curiously. Fugaku was yet to speak a word, only looking at the man with little to no emotion in his eyes. The gaze might have scared anyone in their right mind, warned to not speak any further, but the man continued. Ye know what? Leave the women behind. Heard ye have a knocking wife and a dot? The man's bloodshot eyes widened when he found himself unable to breathe. His feet left the ground and dangled as the rough hand squeezing his neck lifted him up in the air. He clawed at it with his dirty nails, but the Uchiha didn't even flinch. His mouth opened in a vain attempt to inhale some air, but he only managed to choke further. He hadn't even seen the man move. He was there 1 second, and then he wasn't. Was this what a shinobi was? It was absurd. ASE. He managed to let out painfully, his terrified eyes welling up with tears as he fought for his survival. He looked up into his tormentor's eyes and instantly regretted it. What cursed eyes! Get lost! Fugaku threw him away roughly, his face set in a heavy scowl as he kept himself from ending the fool's miserable existence. The drunk was sent face-first scrambling on the ground. He didn't need to be told twice, stumbling as he got up and staggered away, all too happy to leave this place altogether. Freak! The man called over his shoulder as he fled. Fugaku closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He was proud of his ability to retain composure at the bleakest of times, but these days, he shook his head and turned around, resuming his walk to the council chambers. The silence on the street and the clear lack of people now, the wind howling in the empty streets, did not bother him. The clan heads sat around the long table. Inoichi, Shikaku, and Choza sat together, side by side, but then it was nothing new. The 3 of them were childhood friends, teammates, and practically family at this point. The Hyuga clan head sat at the end of the table, his eyes closed and his lips thinned in a neutral line, opposed to the scowl on the Uchiha clan head's face, who sat at his left. Tsum, the Inazuka clan's matriarch, had her arms crossed in front of her chest, still wearing her jonin flak jacket, and had one of her eyes closed, the other carefully looking at the 3 elders at the front end of the table. The giant wolfish canine sitting on the floor beside her might have been intimidating to some, but Aburame Shibi didn't show it if he was uncomfortable, sitting to the right of Tsum. But then you could never tell if an Aburame was in any discomfort due to their clothes that covered almost every part of their body. Shikaku propped his elbows on the table and interlocked his fingers as he leaned forward. I think it's safe to say that everyone here is curious for the cause of this summoning, he dawdled out, his sharp eyes observing the three elders. He wasn't saying he was bothered by it, since Yoshino couldn't nag him for lounging around at home anymore. This practically counted as work, and the Nara clan head had jumped at the opportunity, albeit without much enthusiasm because work was troublesome. Chosen nodded his head, but before anyone could say anything else, the bandage-clad advisor tapped his cane, the sound echoing off the walls. Indeed, I understand your curiosity, but I shall not take up much of your precious time. He nodded to Hamura, who nodded back to him and turned his back towards them, scribbling something on the board in front of them. He stepped back, satisfied with what he had drawn, and took his place beside his fellow elders. This, Danzo said, gesturing at the sketch on the board with his cane, is a rough layout of the village, as all of you can see. The audience nodded. And this, he said, and moved his cane to the upper right corner of the representation, shall be the new place for accommodation of the Uchiha police force. Slam. Fugaku stood up from his seat, slamming his hands down on the table, his eyes narrow and face etched in a furious scowl. What is the meaning of this? He shouted. The Uchiha are already distanced from the village. Why scramble us off to the edges? Danzo met his eyes confidently, not a shred of fear or unease in his body. He raised his good hand. At ease. The three ANBU agents that had their weapons pointed at the Uchiha scattered in the corners. All the while Fugaku never looked away from the advisor's eyes. You raise your hand if you have any questions. Uchiha-san, not your voice. Let's not devolve ourselves to barbarians. Fugaku's jaw tensed at the patronizing tone, but he sat down in his chair, not giving any glances to the stares that he was getting by his fellow clan heads. He crossed his hands in front of his chest and raised his brow. Danzo nodded. What you foolishly believed to be a tactic aimed against the Uchiha, in truth, could not be any further from that. Fugaku grunted, clearly unconvinced. The traction between the village and the Uchiha, as you must have gathered from the incident today, has been getting worse. To avoid cases similar to what happened today, we have decided to relocate the Uchiha clan to a more appropriate location. This decision is taken while keeping in mind the well-being of your clan and the whole village. He wasn't even surprised that the news had reached their ears. Nor did Fugaku miss the way that the bespectacled elder spoke. The clan and the village. In their minds, they had already separated the two entities. Were the Uchiha not a part of the village? He kept quiet and merely settled on leveling an unamused gaze on the elder. Koharu coughed in her hands. The police force is an integral part of Kanahegakure, and the Uchiha are a valuable asset to the village. We shall not work in a way that would be detrimental to the establishment. What utter madness was this? Their words didn't even match with their actions. Was this the will of fire that the Hokage kept mumbling about? No one spoke a word in Fugaku's favor. Even if the Nara and Akimichi appeared to be apologetic, and even Hayashi's face was set in a mildly uncomfortable expression, no one stepped forward in his defense. And why would they? A dark voice that was not quite his own echoed inside his head. The clowns benefit from it all, taking our land for themselves. Even if they act ashamed, they are only dancing out of joy inside their minds. Fugaku almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. The meeting isn't over yet, Uchiha-san? Hamura spoke out, adjusting his glasses as he saw the Uchiha making his way to the door. Fugaku ignored the man and the curious stares at his back and opened the door with a click. It is. He didn't look back when he spoke, stepping out of the room. For me, anyway. Hi, Hinata-chan. The two men looked at her in confusion, their pale, unblinking eyes scanning the perimeter for Hinata-chan. The redhead frowned, knitting her eyebrows together, and gave another call. Hi, Na. One of them grunted. Hinata-sama isn't here. She lives inside the main estate. He motioned to the back with his head. This is the entrance gate for the Hyuga grounds. Natsume's eyes widened. When she had parted with Hinata, the Uzumaki girl had been worried about them meeting again. The pale-eyed heiress had given out her address, but clearly, something was wrong. Although all that she could remember was the tallest gates in the whole village, except the main gates, of course. Everything else went over her head. Then let me in. The two men shared a brief glance before looking down at her. A shake of the head. No one is allowed within the main estate of the Hyuga. Only the trusted side branch Hyuga and the main branch members are allowed to go inside Hayashi-sama's house. Side branch? Main branch? It all sounded stupid. Didn't make any sense to her childish mind. She scratched her red hair, pouting her lips. And who the hell was this Hayashi guy? Ah man, I really want to play with her today. The guards did not budge over her twinkling blue eyes as she clasped her hands under her chin. They didn't need to use the all-seeing eye to look past the child's drama. Shoo, brat. The man spoke in a dismissive tone, waving away his hand. It was a pleasant evening, and he didn't want to waste it on a little girl. He just wanted his shift to get over so he could go home for dinner. Jerks! She called over her shoulder as she ran away, sticking out her tongue and pulling down her eyelid when she reached a safe distance. Humph! What was up with old people, anyway? She had only asked where Hinata was so she could play with her. If she had any other friends, she could have gone to them, but she didn't, so it was a lost cause. Well, she did have one other friend. But he wasn't even here. The reminder caused her to puff her cheeks in annoyance. She nodded to herself, promising she would be emptying all his instant noodles by the time he was back. She had the key after all. It was to be used in emergencies, but one time won't count. Hee, that would be a fitting punishment. She didn't know, lost in her internal plotting as she was, when her tiny legs had carried her to the market district of Konoha. The street was overflowing with activity, filled with people everywhere, people of all shapes and sizes, and no one was giving any attention to her. It was both good and bad in her books. She kicked a pebble and followed it as it flew all the way through the street and hit a particularly large man's head. Eek! She shrieked, running off to hide. Eh? Who was that? The giant shouted, looking around wildly for the cause of his recent irritation. He scratched the back of his head, his scowl turning into a nasty grin when he spied something red hidden behind the pole. Natsume's eyes widened as she turned around to flee. However, she found herself unable to run when her feet dangled in the air. She looked back, only to see that the man was holstering her up by the scruff of her neck, his big, brown eyes promising punishment. And what do we have here? The girl gave him a sheepish smile as she tried to laugh it away. I was just looking around. Yeah. She nodded to herself, proud of thinking of an excuse. Oh? For what? The man eyed her unbelievably, looking past her lies without really trying. The girl wasn't skilled in lying, it would seem. She cringed away from the smell of his breath but still looked around for something, anything that could get her out of this situation. Her eyes lit in relief as she saw something, pointing with her finger. That. I was looking for that mask you got there. You know, the man turned around, looking at his shop for the thing that the child was pointing at. Fox mask. His grin turned into a furious scowl as he threw the child to the ground, who shrieked in surprise at the sudden but not unexpected move. The man marched back inside, snatched the mask from the wall, tearing it in the process, and threw it on the child with a grunt, hitting her head. Ah! She raised her hands to guard her head. What did I do? Get lost. Your kind isn't welcome here. The man snapped and then grumbled something inaudible under his breath. She frowned angrily. Whatever. And your breath stinks of poo? Anyway, she ran away from the brutish man and didn't look back at him. It wasn't anything new. They never really hit her, but this much was a regular occurrence. Kicking her out of shops and saying mean stuff to her. She had gotten used to it after a while, but it still hurt. Interlocking her fingers behind her head, she strolled past the market district, which was now suspiciously quiet, as she made her way to the main entrance of the village with a frown on her face. She heard a distinct sound of applause and claps, which grabbed her attention. All the while, she never noticed the person trailing her. Why are all these people here? Tenzo cried out incredulously. He tilted his head to look at his teammates for answers, but what he saw was Naruto walking as if in a daze. His movements chunky and stiff, and his eyes wide and unfocused. Izumi looked mildly irritated, but that was it. The sound of applause and clapping hit his ears like a brick but did not break him out of his daze. He had never been the center of attention like this. During the Chunin exams, the audience was sitting far away for him to ignore their existence. Ignore the feeling of being watched by so many people. It didn't necessarily scare him as much as making him feel uncomfortable since he wasn't used to all this attention, being alone for most of his life. You look uncomfortable. Izumi eyes her friend from the corner. I'm not. Naruto shook his head mechanically. Still, he did not look at her. It was late in the evening by the time they arrived at the gates. Their trip back home had been uneventful. The only happening thing was that Tenzo slipped on a branch when he was spooked by a frog hopping on his face. Other than that, nothing of note had happened. Kakashi had left, vanished in the crowd as soon as they arrived at the gates, leaving the three of them to fend for themselves. It was a dick move on his behalf, not like any of them could do something about it. As soon as they had entered the gates, they were bombarded with a deafening roar of applause and whistles. It was sudden and unexpected enough to shock Naruto. And exactly who was it that told the masses about them winning the Chunin exams? He blinked when he heard a familiar voice from within the crowd. A tuft of red hair and whisker marks greeted him with a wide grin, her presence somehow enough to break him out of his condition as he smiled at her and raised his hand in greeting when he froze. His eyes wide and mouth half open. 9 massive tails swung around, leveling buildings and mountains into rubbles all the same. The hateful red eyes, a blinding fury roaring within them, locked onto his terrified violet ones as he whimpered, now somehow back to his 6-year-old self, to his horror. All around him was fire and wails, charred and mutilated bodies that littered the ground around him. A desperate cry of a mother whose child lay unmoving. The pleading wails of a man being crushed within the walls of his own home pierced his ears as if nails. Mind-numbing fear overcame his senses as his body shook, and his knees gave out beneath him as he sat there on his knees, equal parts mesmerized and terrified. He looked at his shaking hands with trembling eyes as the skies above him broke into a hail of fire, horrifying yet beautiful. The beast stopped itself, locked its sinister eyes with his, and roared. The air vibrating from the sheer intensity of it raised goosebumps along his arms. Death, a touch, a shout. His name. Someone was shaking him. Violently. Someone who, Naruto, a shove. A push. A shout. His name, Naruto. Go away. Snap out of it. A slap. He blinked owlishly, the dots clearing in his vision, looking at the concerned face of his teammate and friend, her hand outstretched. A frown on her face and her black eyes misted with concern. For him, he raised a hand to rub at his stinging cheek. Where? He looked around hastily, placing a hand to his chest to calm his erratic heart, not caring about the freaked-out crowd of people. Where did it go? He asked quietly. Are you okay? You were screaming. Tenzo slapped him on his back, making him stumble forward with the shove. He rounded upon his friend but stopped on seeing the same look of concern on his face. His eyes widened. Was he dreaming? It wasn't like him to lose himself like this. This was concerning. The entire reason why he had become a shinobi was because he refused to feel helpless ever again. But clearly he was still too weak. He had promised himself, aimed to become so strong that the beast would be a mere annoyance. Strong enough to go after that man and rightfully demand his answers. Strong enough to protect what was his. He didn't have any lofty goals. No motivation to become the leader. Was it selfish of him to become powerful for such a cause? Was it immoral? He didn't want to think about it too much, but the thoughts plagued his mind and heart. Although, to say those were the only reasons for him to move forward would be a lie. He broke out of his musings, shaking his head, and looked around. He felt a sick feeling in his stomach when he noticed the lack of red hair in the crowd. Naruto was just about to run off to look for her. Did she hear what he said? He had to apologize. Where did she go? He hadn't even taken a single step when he felt a hand on his shoulder, stopping him in his place. Let me G-dash. You have been summoned by the Hokage Genin. A bird-masked shinobi, an ANBU, spoke, his voice somewhat distorted as he stopped the boy from rounding off. Naruto grunted as he tried to shrug off the iron grip, making the man dig his fingers into his shoulder somewhat painfully. I won't take much time, the blonde-haired boy protested. Afraid it's urgent. The man didn't budge. Naruto took a deep breath in defeat and looked at his friends in resignation. Izumi gave him a small nod of understanding, her face still scrunched in mild concern, and Tenzo gave a thumbs up. The two of them went off ahead without him. The man eased the grip on his shoulder, making it easier for him to shrug off. Follow me. Don't fall behind. The bird face was starting to annoy him. The day before, the tall man moved forward, his long, white hair resting on his back and a casual expression on his face. The traditional Geta sandals pattered on the floor as he walked, but perhaps the most distinct thing would be his left arm, which was bandaged and cast all the way through his shoulder to his fingers. Jiraiya stopped in his stride, just by the reception of the hospital. A young woman sat on the seat, writing and erasing something repeatedly in her notebook. The white-haired pervert propped his right elbow on the desk, a charming smile on his face as he coughed to get her attention. He was not deterred when it did not work and coughed louder. Ha! The woman broke out of her daze with a start, blinking owlishly, and looked around for the disturbance. Perhaps you're looking for me? Jiraiya said in a deep voice, a roguish grin on his face and his right hand in the long white mane of hair. He eyed the woman up and down. Not bad at all. He only realized he had spoken that out loud when he received a stinging slap to his cheek. Pervert! Urahara Kayasuke was content with his life. He had achieved much ever since he first became a medic, climbed the ranks faster than anyone else and established his position at the top of the chain. Most of all, since Senju Tsunade had left, he was the best medic in the whole village and the head of it all. Somewhere in his career, he had become fascinated with human life. It wasn't something rare for a medic, but his interest stretched to a borderline obsession. Insanity. He had helped Orochimaru in his experiments whenever the man required him to. In return, he would be the only other one who would be getting the formula to extend human lives. Just thinking about all the money he could bring in from such a formula was unimaginable. The nobles and daimyos will almost drown him in gold and valuables for him to treat their dying families and friends. He did not consider himself a bad person by any means, so what if he had ended a few or so lives prematurely? It was only a minor sacrifice in the grand scheme of things, a drop in the ocean, and he would be saving many more lives once they finally have the formula in their grasp. Senju Hashirama was an even better healer than his granddaughter, after all. All they had to do was recreate his abilities. He was not a bad man at all. Then why was he in the current situation? The man currently sitting opposite to him smiled. It wasn't a comforting smile by any means, and Kayasuke knew that the man knew it. The toad sage laughed, as if catching up with an old acquaintance, and slapped his right hand repeatedly on the table, the only thing that separated the two men. Kayasuke laughed too, a little awkwardly and incredibly forced. But then what was he supposed to do? There were only so many reasons he could think of for the man to see him in person, and none of them sounded good to him. He mostly stayed in his office, working only on the most severe cases when they required his help. And the toad sage didn't look like someone who was in critical condition, even if his arm was clearly broken and fixed recently. Jiraiya stopped laughing abruptly and leaned across the table, a furious scowl on his previously smiling face as he violated the personal space of the doctor. What can I help you with, Jiraiya-sam? Cut the crap. I know what you did and who you have been working with. Only 4 people knew about Kushina, and other than her friend, all of them are mysteriously dead. Jiraiya sat back in his chair, leaning back as he eyed the man. Start speaking, or you're only going to make it hard for yourself. Kayasuke stilled for a moment, contemplating his situation. If he was facing someone else, he could have called the security and thrown out the person. But one of the legendary Sannin, he had to tread carefully. The head medic stood up, making his way to the shelf to his right. Even if things looked bleak, he still has one thing that might help him. At least enough for him to escape. Back when he was still in contact with Orochimaru, The man had given him a blade for his troubles. A sign of good faith, if you will. It was no ordinary blade, the legendary Tsunade. A sinister smile crept to his face as he turned his back to the toad sage and pressed a particular red book on the shelf. The book fell on the other side, and he inserted his hand in the empty space, feeling around. He played the encounter in his mind, used the blade to surprise the large man, take advantage of his broken arm, and injure him enough to flee. The man would be unable to follow him, and he would escape using the secret route that joined the hospital to his secret lab. No one would be able to find him there as he bided his time and somehow contacted his ally, Orochimaru. Surely, the man still required his assistance? The perfect plan. He finally felt the distinct cool of steel on his fingers, and his eyes widened in glee. The man turned around with as much speed as he could, swinging the Tsunade in a wide arc that was sure to hit the other man with a war cry. Arf! Click CRCK. What? His eyes widened in surprise, now finding himself face to face with the white-haired man. His lips curled up in an amused smile. Jiraiya had stopped the Tsunade between his thumb and index finger. The legendary Tsunade broke apart in pieces and fell to the ground. Are you done? Kayasuke fell to the ground on his backside, crawling away from the large man. He raised his hands up in defense. Wait. You can't touch me. I'm too important for the village to lose. Yes, he was important. He would at least get a chance to explain himself before the Hokage. He could vanish any time in that period. The realization brought back his confidence as he stood up, placing his hand on the wall for support as he faced Jiraiya. The difference in their heights was instantly visible to the doctor. There was just something intimidating about the way that the tall man stood in front of him. Yes, that's right. You can't get rid of me. I'm too important to the village. You can't just dispose of me like this. Ha ha ha. Especially since the blonde bimbo deserted the village. Jiraiya's lips trembled, confusing the doctor as he suddenly burst out in guffaws. The toad sage tried to control his laughter, wiping the tears from his eyes as he struggled and reduced his laughter to small chuckles. Kayasuke, seeing his opportunity, was already by the door of the room, flinging it open with a slam. He never saw the blonde bimbo or her fist that slammed his face with the force of a behemoth. Tsunade walked inside the room and cracked her knuckles, huffing and murmuring something under her breath. Her green haori fluttered as the blonde-haired woman rounded up on her friend, who was still chuckling, and took a threatening step towards him. Jiraiya stopped abruptly, raising his hands placatingly. I wasn't laughing at you. Do you believe I would laugh as a man insults my girlfriend? He pressed a hand to his chest, his lips forming a pout. Idiot! She said with a scowl on her face. Do you want to get punched to death? Not before you admit that you have fallen for my charms. He grinned happily. Tsunade shook her head in exasperation. She had packed her bags as soon as the pervert had vomited all the information. To say that she was furious would be an understatement, something that the forest of the Senju grounds could attest to, after the woman had pummeled trees after trees in her fury to calm herself down. It had worked. Somewhat. Her apprentice Shizune and pet pig Tun, of course, had followed her to the village. The woman's decision to return back to her home was not entirely difficult to comprehend. The war took away her little brother Nawaki and lover Dan, leaving her alone, except for Jiraiya and her teacher. Tsunade would not let any niece or nephew of hers feel the same loneliness that she did, no matter how much of a coward she was. All of them are the same. Her lower lip trembled as she sucked in from her nose, shabbily wiping her moist eyes with her sleeves. It was her fault. All hers. Why did she hope that he would be any different? It was clear what had happened. Someone told Naru about her, something that made him scared of her. Those eyes. She was intimately familiar with those scared eyes. She saw them day after all. But to see them on a person that she thought was her friend. The redhead shook her head violently. She had no friends. All of them only pretended to be nice. Even Hinata didn't want to play with her. Why else would she give her the wrong address? And Naruto was the worst. He was probably laughing at her on her back, making fun of her. What was wrong with her? Was it her face? Her hair? Arg! She tugged on her hair, hard enough to pluck out a few red strings as she wailed. It had to be her tomato hair. She would be better off without it. Crunch. She froze upon hearing the sound and slowly turned back to look over her shoulder. A man. He was taller than her by a lot, obviously, and had spiky brown hair gathered in a short ponytail. There was a shaky smile on his face as he kept fidgeting with his feet, although the most distinctive feature would be a scar that ran across his nose. She eyed him with suspicion. "Who are you?" The man raised a hand in greeting, chuckling somewhat nervously. "My name is Irika. What's a kid like you doing alone so far away?" Indeed, it was a place far away from the center of Konoha. There seldom was any person who came here. Although she had not been looking when she ran away, her emotions in disarray, so she wasn't really sure where she ended up. "What's it to you?" she asked flippantly. Irika chuckled again. He shoved his hands in his pockets and looked away. "Nothing." "Really?" he said, shaking his head with a friendly smile on his face. "I just thought that maybe I should accompany you to your home? It's not safe for children to be out alone." The way he said that sent a shiver up her spine. She looked around and noticed the eerie silence in the dead of night, large trees that appeared seemingly alive. The wind howled, making the trees sway, creaking. It was scary. She jumped down from the rock that she was sitting on and hastily walked towards the scarred man, looking at the friendly smile and his outstretched hand. The girl took his hand, albeit somewhat hesitantly. Irika didn't protest and went onward with her. Fine. But I'm not scared." If she would have given it some thought, or if she was a little smarter, a little less desperate, she would have found it a little too suspicious. If no one ever came here, in the deserted grounds, what was this Irika person doing out here? This was a new experience for him, that much was certain. The Toad Sage, Slug Princess, and Professor. Being in the same room as these legends was somewhat overwhelming for him. It didn't help that the blonde-haired woman wasn't even pretending to look away as she kept staring at him with this weird gaze, as if making sure if he was really there or not. The large man was leaning against the wall, his eyes closed. His violet eyes caught the bandaged arm of the Toad Sage, something that shocked him. There weren't many shinobi who could injure one of the legendary Sannin, after all. The Senju woman was sprawled on the couch, and she might have been drunk, something that he thought while noticing her red cheeks. She appeared to be in a daze, almost unconscious. The oldest out of the group was looking out at the village, his melancholic gaze resting on the stone faces of the previous Hokage. This was the first time Naruto had seen the Sandaime like this. He looked like he was at a loss, his body slouching somewhat. This was wrong. The Hokage wasn't supposed to be like this. It went against everything that Naruto thought of the Hokage. He should be strong, not weak and feeble. "In my admittedly long life," the old man spoke in a weary voice, slow voice akin to the sound of grating a stone. "I have seen much. I have witnessed the shaking might of the generation that came before mine, and the burning promise of the youth that came after me. But none stood apart like him." He shook his head and focused on the fourth face on the mountain. The old man smiled bitterly. Naruto was captivated by the old leader's voice. The Hokage had a voice that demanded attention, carried a great sense of worth. He wasn't the only one who was listening attentively to the man. Jiraiya and Tsunade were silent as well. Their eyes closed and an expression of sorrow etched on their faces. He was feeling somewhat nervous, to be honest. What did the Hokage need from him? Why was he summoned between these legendary people, two of whom he had only read about in books? There was once a young man, brave and loyal almost to a fault. His peers looked up to him and his seniors took pride in him. His entire presence was something magical, electrifying, a distinct charm, but he was still a simple man, craved for family and companions like everyone else. When he came back to his empty house at the end of the day, he felt alone and miserable. No one to welcome him back. I do not know how many times he must have cried himself to sleep as a child. He never bothered anyone about his problems. He was just like that, innocent and pure, but he was not deterred. Not at all. He still worked hard, still gave it his all, and finally found friends who had his back and a woman who took his heart. He endured, and at one point the entire village of Konoha endured with him. The smallest utter of his mere name was enough to excite the young ones. Enough to make the wrinkled faces of the elderly smile with love and gratitude. Enough to make the enemy freeze in fear. The young man was content with his life, finally. But he still had much to accomplish. Then, something happened. Something that broke apart the brave young man into tiny pieces of a puzzle. He lost his firstborn, his son. The infant was pronounced dead in the first hour of his fragile life. His greatest moment of joy became his bleakest ever. How he managed to recover from that, or if he ever did recover, is unknown to me. Only the woman had the answers. But the woman would not speak of them. The pieces of the puzzle came together yet again. The new picture a mockery of the previous one. But if one were to look at it, it was not that different at all. The man was back to his feet, stronger than ever, and carried the entire village of Konoha on his back. And in return, Konoha named him her fourth protector. The brave young man died too soon. His dreams of a family remained just that, a dream. But his death was not in vain. The two of us would not be here right now, talking amongst ourselves, if it was not for his selfless sacrifice. Nor would Konoha be standing tall. Well, in the end, at least he managed to save the life of his children. That's what he ever wanted in the end. Wouldn't you say? Throughout his speech, the Hokage never turned around. He kept looking straight into the eyes of his successor's statue. The old man had regrets of his own. His failures. The old Hokage had been strong for so long, led the village of Konoha throughout 2 great wars, and came roaring out victorious. But at the end of the day, Sarutobi was an old man, and it showed. His biggest failure was letting his successor die before him. And it stuck up to him like a leech. Hiruzen turned back to look at the youngster, his wild, golden locks. Something he saw every day in front of him, shining in the pale moonlight. And he pitied the broken form of his shinobi. When the Hokage had started speaking, Naruto had little to no idea exactly what it was that he wanted to convey. The tale that he told made him feel a warm feeling in his chest. He didn't know what it was. Only when the pieces started to click, the resemblances started to make sense, did he have an inkling of what was being told to him. He felt nauseous, feeling the rush of it all, the gravity of the information that was being told to him. Yandame, and he had no idea when his fingers had ended up locked inside his thick lock of hair. His head hung, the twin trails of tears that rolled off his cheeks and dripped down on the floor. Namikaze Minato, why? He wanted to ask. Why do you tell me this now? But the words won't escape his mouth. He felt happy. He felt sad. He wanted to go to the top of the mountain and shout at the top of his lungs. To tell each and everyone in the whole world, my dad. The word brought a feeling of safety along with it. A sense of pride and belonging. He wanted to laugh, to share the joy that was exploding within him. But the tears won't stop. The realization that he could never meet his father hit him like a brick. He had always thought of confronting his parents, asking them why they gave him up to a madman. What exactly was he going to tell them? He hadn't thought of that far. But at least, he could talk to them. He couldn't do that now, but it brought a sense of closure with it. He was the son of a hero. Who? He spoke out after some time, his voice raspy. Who was the woman? Who was my mother? A childish voice called out desperately within his mind. The voice of a little child that had never felt the comforting touch of his mother. Is my mother alive? It was foolish to assume that she would be still alive, but he had to ask. No one spoke for a while, and he thought that they might have ignored him. Why weren't they saying anything? It was irritating. Cruel of them. My mother. He began, but Jiraiya cut him before he could finish. She was a feisty kunoichi from the land of whirlpools. Known as the red-hot habanero because of her temper, her name was Uzumaki Kushina. Uzumaki? The only one who went by that name was, yeah. She's your little sister. Jiraiya could read his face like an open book, follow his train of thoughts. So it wasn't hard for him to guess what he was going to ask next. Surprisingly, the fact didn't make him feel much different. He had always felt an extreme protective instinct around the younger girl. Subconsciously, he might have always known that the two of them were related, either by blood or by fate. Perhaps that was the reason why he had been so eager to make her feel happy. to make her feel like she wasn't alone, that she could have what others had as well, that she could have what he couldn't. And then he made her feel like an absolute freak. There was a deafening roar of thunder as the skies flashed blue, illuminating the dark night with an ethereal glow for a fleeting moment. The stormy clouds exploded in a shower of rain all of a sudden, the downpour falling against the window of the Hokage's office. The door creaked as it closed behind the genin. Hiruzen finally turned away from the window and made his way to the desk, sitting on his chair and leaning back with a tired sigh. He closed his eyes as the pattering noise of raindrops hitting the glass filled the glum silence of the room. Do you think that I did the right thing, Jiraiya? You couldn't have handled it any better, Sensei. Tsunade snored. Irika-san. The little girl spoke, her voice timid. Irika blinked rapidly, breaking out of the trance that he was in. He looked around a bit nervously and then heaved a shaky sigh of relief. No one was there. Natsumi looked up at him, walking by his side with her hand in his hand, her blue eyes innocently asking a question. Why help me? Why was he helping her? The one who was hated by everyone. She hadn't thought about it earlier, but now, my mother taught me to help others in need. Wah, she beamed. Your mom sounds like a cool person, Irika-san. Irika laughed a bit, breaking out of his nervousness. That she was. He looked up, just in time for a deep rumbling thunder to shock the skies. It started as a mild drizzle, a drop hitting right below his eye and rolling down his cheek. Before she died, that is, he mumbled detachedly. The redhead stopped all of a sudden, making the man stop with her. I am sorry. I didn't. The grip on the girl's wrist strengthened, making her look at their joined hands worriedly. Irika-san, you're hurting me. Her voice was getting shaky, her eyes wide as she tried to escape from the iron grip. She tugged on it, but it didn't budge. Say. Irika ignored her as he continued to speak. Do you have any idea what the monster fox is? Uzumaki child. She shook her head rapidly, squinting her eyes shut when her wrist made the sound of a crack. She cried out, Don't know. I don't know. Please, let me go. Irika didn't let go and only gripped harder on her wrist. He ignored the screams of the child and started to drag her when she dug her legs in the ground. The downpour increased, another thunderstorm echoing in the skies. His mother and father had screamed as well, hadn't they? They suffered as well in front of the beast. It only fits that he made the beast suffer as well. When his parents had walked into the mouth of death, Irika had been a child. Irika was a chunin now, albeit he hadn't been working for long. Most of the time, he kept himself inside the walls of his apartment. But he had heard the rumors surrounding the child, heard the whispers behind her back, and seeing her hair, the hair reminiscent of the fires that the beast caused in its wake, and those whiskers, he wasn't exactly sure of what the child was. But he knew this was no mere child. This child was somehow connected to the foul beast that had devoured his parents. This child was his only way to get revenge on the monster. The girl was openly crying now, mumbling incoherently, her red hair now soaking wet and sticking to her face, messily covering it. Irika didn't feel any pity for it. He was doing the right thing. Avenging his father and mother was a noble thing, wasn't it? If it's any consolation, I'll kill myself after I kill you. He would be foolish to think that the Hokage would just let him go after this. The people might back him up a bit. Some of them were of the same mindset as him regarding the child. But the Hokage would have his head for sure. He had been following her for a while from afar. He knew she visited the old leader often, perhaps even had a good relationship with him. He looked down at her when she didn't make any sound. Her white shirt was now soaked and filthy with all the dirt. Perhaps she must have accepted her end? It made things easy. But he wanted the beast to suffer, the same way that his mother and father had. Are you trying to fool me? Are you trying to play the innocent one here? His voice was getting loud when he noticed the child was still not replying. Resist. Why was it not resisting? This shouldn't be so easy. This was no mere child. Why? Why was the creature not fighting back? Why did the screams stop? He wanted to rejoice in the cries of the beast. But all he felt was emptiness and this heavy feeling in his heart. He laughed, the sound getting lost in the thunder and rain. There was nothing pleasant about the sound. It was the laugh of a person who didn't know what to do anymore. A man who had lost himself. What was right? What was wrong? Was he a good person? Would his mother say he was a good son for doing what he was doing? A weak whimper attracted his attention to the young girl. The first thing he thought of was weak. She looked so weak and small. "I'm sorry." Her voice barely above a whisper. She lifted up her head slowly and looked at him with innocent blue eyes. "Sorry." Irika gritted his teeth. "Sorry?" He whispered harshly through clenched teeth. An apology wouldn't bring back the dead. The beast should know it as well. Was it mocking him? Even after all this time? He raised his hand to slap her. A rumble of the heavens. Lightning. Flash. His palm never met her cheek. Irika's world was blinded by a flicker of orange. So bright, warm, malicious, angry. "Stay away from my sister." The brown-haired man was flung through the air, letting the girl drop to the wet ground. His face caved in from the force of the sudden strike that hammered him. He flipped in the air multiple times before another flash of lightning overcame his senses. An elbow to his gut sent him crashing down on the ground, coughing blood, feeling like his insides were electrocuted. Is this it? He thought to himself. He took deep breaths, laying down, his chest heaving, aching, and his lungs burning. The heavy rain was reduced to a mild drizzle now, soaking his brown hair. His blue Hittite unwound itself, falling off to the ground with a clink. "Mother, father, I couldn't avenge you." The sound of footsteps alerted him to the presence of the unknown person. He didn't move. He couldn't move even if he wanted to. The realization didn't make him freak out, opposed to what he thought. He couldn't care if he was killed. His revenge remained incomplete, the souls of his loving parents unrest. "Who?" He creaked out, his eyes filled with tears. He wanted to know who would go to such lengths for a monster. Why would someone be so cruel to stop him from his revenge? A person's face appeared in his vision. The water drops that rolled down the man. A boy? The boy's face and soaked, blonde hair, dripping down on the ground beside him. The boy did not speak for a while, merely looking at him with an unexplainable emotion. "Naru." Irika barely heard the hoarse whisper. Her voice. The boy looked back at the girl. Irika didn't know what he said to her, or if he said anything at all, when he found cold, unforgiving, violet eyes focused on him. A silent storm brewing within them when the boy opened his mouth. "Uzumaki Naruto." The last thing Irika heard was a sharp intake of breath before his world went dark. A foot smashed down on his face.